Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, June the 30th, 2023. You know, tomorrow is July the 1st, and it would have been Princess Diana's 62nd birthday. So I'm going to talk about Princess Diana tomorrow. In the meantime, I've got a question for you. And don't Google it because that would kind of spoil the fun. So, who walked the earth longer? Princess Diana or Marilyn Monroe? In other words, who was alive from birth to death the longest of those two women? Any ideas? Okay, well, I will tell you at the end of this video what the answer is. So, as I'm not going to talk about Princess Diana, I wanted to talk about Princess Diana today, but I've decided, well, I should really do it on her birthday. I'm instead going to talk about Kamala Harris. Now, the reason I'm going to talk about Kamala Harris is, well, people are talking about how her polling data is really awful. And everyone is down on her, but at the same time they're kind of worried that she is a heartbeat away from becoming president. So I thought it would be a good idea to just have a look at her horoscope. I did look at her horoscope some months ago when I had far fewer subscribers than I do now. I mean, I still don't have very many subscribers, but this is a second pass on Kamala Harris. I won't say the same as what I said before, and I'll try to look at some other stuff. But, it is particularly this question about her bad polling numbers. I mean, can we find any astrological signature for her bad polling numbers? But before I do that, I am going to look at the positions of the stars for today. Apologies for the picture of Kamala Harris if you have no interest in her, but anyway, you can just pretend she doesn't exist. So what is going on today? Well, there is a change. The moon is moving out of Scorpio and into Sagittarius. This happens New York time, probably about, off the top of my head, around 11 a.m. So it kind of depends where you are. So that is a change. Moon in Scorpio is, very brooding, emotional, likes to keep itself to itself, doesn't want to discuss its feelings. Yet Moon in Sagittarius, by contrast, is sort of open and great sense of humor, tactless. So really completely the opposite of Scorpio. So this is a big change. And the moon, just before it enters Sagittarius, makes a is it a trine or is it a sextile? It is a sextile with Pluto. So some of us might have the ability to use our feelings just before the moon moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius, to use our feelings constructively, perhaps to get results, and perhaps we'll have an understanding of other people's emotions, and we'll be able to use that. I think that's going to be particularly the case if you're in Europe. If you're in, I don't know, if you're in the West Coast, by the time that moon, you're going to find that the moon sextile Pluto happens very early, so you might miss it. This movement of the moon into Sagittarius, it sounds fun, but I'm not convinced that it's going to be as great as it should be. One reason is that as the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a conjunction to the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so we're going to feel a certain sense of foreboding, I think. Perhaps, we're moving out of our comfort zone, and as we move out of our comfort zone, we're going to start to be worried about the unknown. After all, the Mars and Saturn is about death and destruction and decay and delay and that kind of stuff. So I'm not convinced that this movement into Sagittarius is going to be particularly great. Look, I mean, the moon, just as the moment it moves into Sagittarius, it actually starts to make a square aspect to Saturn. So that suggests sort of inhibition. We're going to have this great desire to be open about our feelings, to be tactless, to really express ourselves, but it may be difficult because we might find that actually the world is quite hostile and is not particularly sympathetic to what we have to say. And while this is going on, the Sun and Mercury are aspecting the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. Now, I talked a bit about this yesterday, and it's continued concerns about the political and economic situation. Jupiter and Saturn is about the business cycle. And so on a personal level, we'll be thinking about how is the business cycle affecting us? Because we're starting to realize it does affect us. It's not some distant thing that, that business channels talk about. It actually affects us. So be aware of that and, think about it. Because really, if you can think about the economy and if you can think about the business cycle, then you can work out how best to deal with it. So, don't shy away from it. Just because you don't feel you know anything about it, you can do something. So that's what you need to do with Sun and Mercury hitting the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. As far as relationships are concerned, Mercury is semi-square the Venus-Mars midpoint. You can see this here. There's Mercury, there's Venus-Mars, there's the midpoint there. So midpoint is about 22 Leo. So Mercury is 45 degrees from the Venus-Mars midpoint. So Venus-Mars is about relationships, it's about sexuality. Mercury is about communication. So some of us might be thinking a lot about relationships and sex and stuff like that. People might be talking about it as well as, talking about their relationships and their sex life and all this kind of stuff. I don't know how appropriate that's going to be, but that's something you should be aware of. Though don't allow your mind to run ahead of itself. There's always a danger of fantasy. Fantasy going nowhere. It's just a waste of time, and it could cause a lot of damage if you get the wrong impression. So that's Mercury hitting the Venus-Mars midpoint. Now, let's now move to my forecasts for the 12 signs on Friday, June the 30th, 2023. Aries, there's a point where emotional intensity morphs into spiritual awareness, and you may be reaching this point, and it all turns on a single dramatic thought. Taurus, if you spend too long with one person, you slip off the shallows and move into a world of fantasy and repressed memory, or perhaps you want to focus on something else, for example, money and power. Gemini, consider the possibility that you're distracted and that your view of the world is far from perfect. Ideas about love and relationships may have little or no basis in reality. Cancer, you see chaos and you imagine order, and then you interact with the world without caring who you offend. Yet your words can be very seductive. Leo, consider the influence you're having on the world around you. You are being noticed, yet those close to you may feel that they can't express their true feelings. Virgo, want to reach for new horizons? Then stay at home. And while you're at it, consider what makes the world tick. When you distance yourself from the mainstream media, things become clear. That's because Mercury is ruler of Virgo, and Mercury is on the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. And as I've said, Jupiter-Saturn is about politics, a business cycle, economics, that kind of thing. Libra, you have an idea about money, but is it complete? Has it been battle-tested? Before making commitments, make sure you get a second opinion. Scorpio, you have a moment of power when your efforts can have a real impact on the world around you. But the opportunity won't last forever. Sagittarius, yes, things are moving your way, but are you going to be happy? In some ways, it's a zero-sum situation, with your gain being someone else's loss. Capricorn, time to take a breather, to distance yourself from the world and its problems. Those close to you probably have a similar view. Aquarius, you're the cleverest person in the room, but that doesn't necessarily give you an advantage. A sense of humour acts like a smokescreen. Pisces, as the day progresses, you become increasingly focused, and in terms of business and career, your vision can make you new friends, but you well understand what can go wrong. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transition to the I Ching. And as always, I threw the 3 coins in the air and asking the question, what is Friday going to be like for people visiting my YouTube channel? Now, it might sound a bit boring when I keep saying what is particular day going to be like, but I just need to remind us that we are asking a question. With the I Ching, you ask a question, you write a question down, so you unambiguously write it down. Because if you don't write it down, you might forget, you might change it. You've got to write it down, and then you throw the coins in the air. Or if you wanted to spend ages doing it, you can use yarrow sticks, but I'm certainly not going to go into that. So the first hexagram I got was breakthrough, number 43. This suggests that there's a danger. And breakthrough is about announcing that there is a danger. You've got to be on your guard. When I say danger, I'm almost certainly not talking about any physical danger. You just have to think about all the things that could go wrong. Or perhaps all the things that you're expecting to go wrong today. Though you perhaps might need a bit of imagination there. And the first impulse is to be on your guard. And we will be on our guard. And the first thing that's going to happen is that we're going to perhaps go into panic stations. There seems to be a danger. Something seems to be going wrong. But then it's probably okay. That's the first thing that's going to happen. So there might then be a moment of complacency. Things are okay. But all the while, something really is going wrong. And please, I'm almost certainly not talking about anything serious. But the I Ching talks about with the final line moving, it's the top one. Very often with the I Ching, when the top line moves, it's not particularly fortunate. And the I Ching says that in this situation, the forces of disintegration and evil might actually get the better of us if we're not very careful. Again, I'm only asking for one day. It's not going to be that dramatic. But through complacency, through not being properly prepared, we could get a situation where where things move out of control, where disintegrating forces almost overwhelm us. Fortunately, the hexagram does move, and it moves to fellowship with men. And really, this is quite a good hexagram. Now, I should say fellowship with men. That means fellowship with people. People in general. So we don't have to. I don't want to gender the word men. It's just could be men, could be women, could be both. It's just people in general. There are people around us who are going to be there for us. So if we do find that we're in a situation that is going out of control, if disintegrating forces seem to be rampant, we can get help. So we just have to be ready to ask for it. And then I think things should be okay. And by the end of the day, we can take control of the situation. So now I want to talk about Kamala Harris. Now, as I understand it, she's not very popular. She seems almost doomed, because she seems, everyone says how awful she is, how she cackles, and if she became president, it would be disastrous. But if Joe Biden can just stay alive, she'll stay as vice president, and after that, move into obscurity. But we have to be careful of that, because that's what everyone is saying. But is it actually true? So here is Kamala Harris's chart. So what stands out about it? Firstly, she's got the North Node on the ascendant. Like Meghan Markle, she's got North Node on the ascendant. The North Node is about where she's supposed to be going. She's supposed to be putting herself first. She is supposed to be selfish, and that's okay. Selfishness is neutral. It's not a bad thing to be selfish. She shouldn't spend too much time trying to pander to other people's needs. She's got to work out what she needs to do. And maybe that's a problem she's got. Maybe on one hand she wants to be a leader, but on the other hand, perhaps she doesn't quite have the security to take her own initiative, so she consults other people and it all ends up as a mess. And this is supported by the fact that she was born incredibly close to a full moon. There you can see Kamala Harris. She's got her moon at 2739 Aries and her sun at 2748 Libra. So what do we make of this full moon, which has to be really important? That is a very close full moon. So my view on this full moon is that, firstly, I take the view that in a woman's chart, the moon and the moon sign is more important than the sun sign. It's the moon that matters. In a male chart, it's obviously the opposite. I think in my experience, women kind of start off as through childhood, perhaps more expressing their sun, but around the early 20s, they kind of move into their moons. And with men, it's kind of the opposite. It's starting off as their moons, and then again moving into their suns. So when I know she's a Libran, but in a way you should treat her as an Aries, because she does have the moon in Aries. But it's an incredible battle for her. She wants to be an Aries, but she keeps getting pulled back by that sun in Libra. And I'm guessing that the people really close to her might find that she alternates between the two. One moment she can be very dynamic, trying to be a leader. Then the other moment she just has a sense of helplessness and needs to get advice, and it really doesn't help. So my advice to Kamala Harris is she needs to be a leader. She mustn't spend too much time. She mustn't spend too much time listening to other people. So as far as her as a politician, or even as a president, I mean, can you envision that in her chart? Now, forget what your biases, prejudices, whatever are about her. I'm sorry, I should say that I can't stand her. She seems awful, but I'm trying to put that to one side. She has Saturn in Aquarius, and I know it's retrograde, but it is in Aquarius. It's its own sign, and it's very close to the midheaven. So if you've got Saturn in its own sign close to the midheaven, this is a sign of leadership. This is a possible sign that someone could reach the very top. They could become president. And for example, and it's helped by the fact that her sun in Libra is trine her Saturn. That does give a lot of control, believe it or not. It might not seem that she has much control, but I'm kind of getting the feeling that you shouldn't completely write off Kamala Harris. Don't fully underestimate her. There's scope certainly for underestimating her to some extent, but don't go too far in terms of underestimating her. So that's some of the stuff going on in her chart. Now, Saturn at the moment is in early Pisces. Notice she's got her midheaven at 224 Pisces. So what that means is that Saturn is moving backwards. It's retrograde, and it's moving backwards onto her midheaven. And I don't think this is going to be very helpful. She's just had her second Saturn return. So the Saturn is returning almost to the position Saturn was when she was born. It doesn't get there. It goes stationary, I think in October, around 0 degrees Pisces. It never goes fully back into Aquarius. So, over the next few months with Saturn on her midheaven, it's going to be really difficult. These poll numbers, the criticism of her, it's just going to pile up. So it's not going to get any better for her. On the other hand, she's vice president. No one can get rid of her. So what solace is it to her enemies that her poll numbers are down and she's getting all this criticism, because she's not going anywhere. So maybe things will get better for her. And another thing going on is her solar arc direction. So if you look at her chart, and again, you can see this by eye, and with solar arc directions, I've said this recently on several occasions, sometimes you can look at a chart and know what's happening without having to look at tables, without having to do any calculations. So what do we know about Kamala Harris? Okay, she's just had her Saturn return, I think, earlier in the year. So, she's in her late 50s. You can tell that. I mean, she's born in 1964. So her next birthday, she's going to be 59. What do you then see? You look at her Saturn. Her Saturn is at 28 Aquarius. Then you look at her moon. Her moon is 27 Aries. So, in other words, Saturn is around 59 degrees from her moon. So with solar arc directions, 1 degree equals 1 year. So if you look at the solar arc directions, you see that this Saturn is about to hit her moon. So let me just show you what I mean. there is her solar arc directions, and I've set this for today, actually yesterday, June the 29th, 2023. It's very slow, so the solar arc directions on one day are not going to be that different than another day. And you can see that Saturn is at 2739 Aries, so we can put that on a bi-wheel. So inside is Kamala Harris's natal chart. On the outer ring is the solar arc positions. There you can see her solar arc directed Saturn is at 2739 Aries, and her natal moon is at 2739 Aries. In other words, right now, as we speak, her solar arc directed Saturn is conjunct her moon. And we know that she's got a full moon in her chart that's very close. So solar arc directed Saturn is not only conjunct her moon, it's opposition her sun at 2748 Libra. So that full moon, which is a major part of who she is being hit by this Saturn solar arc direction, at a time when transiting Saturn is moving towards her midheaven. So, the next few months are going to be pretty awful for her. Now that doesn't mean to say that she can't become president. She could already be president for all I know. Joe Biden could have died while I've been making this video. So that is certainly something to think about. So Saturn is hitting her moon, it's hitting her sun, and it's therefore hitting her sun-moon midpoint. So if you look at Reinhold Ebertin, Combination of Stellar Influences, if you are into astrology, particularly midpoints, I would really recommend buying the Combination of Stellar Influences. So just see what he says about Saturn on the sun-moon midpoint. So he says, this should give you an idea about what's going on for Kamala. Inner inhibitions or repressions, the state of feeling depressed, increasing loneliness, separation from the community, renunciation, difficulties in a relationship with the other sex, joint and shared suffering, illness, separation. So that's pretty grim, and it may be that in her political circle, I don't know how that works, but she may be feeling really quite isolated, and just may not be a great time for her. So, don't just criticize her, just feel sorry for her. Things are bad. Does this mean that she won't become president? No, it doesn't mean that at all. I also wanted to look at her Vedic chart. We mustn't forget that she is of Indian origin. Part of her, Indian astrology may have a particular resonance. So let's look at this chart. Let's see if there's anything going on, anything to give her some hope. So in Indian astrology, as I've mentioned before, life gets divided up into 9 sections, and all these sections, these Mahadashas, these great periods, and all of these 9 periods, they add up to 120. So the idea is 120 years. So the idea is that if you live your full life, maximum lifetime is 120 years, and that is confirmed so far. Humans tend to die off when they hit around 120. People don't really live much longer than 120. I think in the Bible, several people died at 120. Did Moses die at 120? So 120 is an important age. So that's when you go through all of these periods. So at the moment, she is in a period ruled by Rahu, which is the head of the dragon, and this started in July 2012, and it ends, not for ages, ends in 2030. So it's a massive period of time that she's in. And if you look at her horoscope, her Rahu is in Gemini. And in Indian astrology, Rahu is exalted, I believe, in Gemini. Rahu works well in Gemini. And, according to the legend, Rahu represents the North Node. It's a point where the sun cycle and the moon cycle intersect. And according to the legend, there was some dragon that was trying to steal the potion of immortality from the gods. And I think it drank the potion and got cut in half. So as a result, you've got the head of the dragon and you've got the tail of the dragon. And so because it's drunk a potion of immortality, it can't die. And, the head of a dragon and the tail are about real desire. But Rahu is desire with a head. Ketu, the south node, hasn't even got a head. So it can be about blind desire. And that can include political desire. Margaret Thatcher's political career, the real peak of her political career, took place during her Rahu Dasha. And pretty much as the moment her Rahu Dasha came to an end, her political career came to an end. So, it's important. Now, as far as Kamala Harris was concerned, I don't think anything major happened to her in 2012, but I think in 2017, she got elected to the Senate. Right now she is in her Rahu Mahadasha and Ketu Subdasha, and that's from January 2023 to February 2024. So this is a really up and down period for her. Really stressful. North node, south node. You can see it. I don't know whether you can see that Rahu Ketu. Yeah. So this time between now and February 2024 is it's really difficult for her. But she's not, as I said, she's not going anywhere. This period will end, and then in February 2024, she moves into the Venus sub-period. So I think she's probably going to be in a better position in February of next year when her Venus sub-period comes up. Yet there is a problem because Saturn is in her Indian chart is opposition her Venus. So I think that even after February, there are going to be problems, and Saturn is going to be making this opposition. Right through until the presidential election. So on the face of it, things don't look great. But I do think there's going to be an improvement in February. And I suppose a lot of what happens kind of depends on whether Biden can stay alive. I suppose he will, but as I've recently mentioned, Biden's solar return for his next birthday in November, it's a real train wreck. It may not be about him dying. It may be about the whole world blowing up. I don't know. I just don't like it, and I really hope this war in Ukraine is finished before Biden hits his birthday. I'd kind of right now, I think it's actually more dangerous for the world having Biden as president than having Kamala Harris as president. I don't think she has the same kind of capacity to cause damage as Biden. Anyway, those are some thoughts on Kamala Harris. I'm going to have more thoughts as we think about, the elections, who's going to win, who's going to lose, all this kind of stuff. It's always a stressful time for astrologers making predictions about elections because there's so much scope for embarrassment. I mean, a lot of astrologers got it wrong with Trump in 2016. I mean, I think the reason they got it wrong was because most astrologers are Democrats, and so they have this bias which makes them mess it up. And for myself, I never made a prediction in 2016, so I decided to sit on the fence. So now that's pretty much it. So the only thing for me to now tell you is the answer to my question: who did walk the earth longer? Was it Princess Diana, or was it Marilyn Monroe? The answer is Marilyn Monroe. If you actually add up how long she lived for a day longer than Princess Diana. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today, and I will talk to you tomorrow.